Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. I'm Russ, founder of AMP, sports and exercise scientist, qualified strength and conditioning coach and personal trainer. This week we're going to be delving into some of your questions and some of the topics that have popped up during this week of coaching. So we've got some great questions come in and I'm going to answer two of them, and I've also picked another topic. We're talking about how to build muscle, how to build cardio fitness, and how to avoid training plateaus. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to get notifications when we release new content, and to like, share, and comment. All right, let's get into it. Our first topic is how to build muscle. So there's obviously a really common question, people wanting to change their physiques, become more muscular, maybe get stronger and have a more athletic looking physique. It's also important for all different ages as well. So it's not just young people wanting to change the way they look, but also people a bit older as well, more conscious of losing muscle over time. So building muscle is really important for both for health and also for the way we look. And there are some simple rules based on the research that you can follow with your training program to be most effective at building muscle. So the first thing is you need to be resistance training 3 to 5 times a week. It's that simple. Ideally, you want to target muscle groups that you want to grow by training them twice a week. It just allows enough time for recovery and adaptation to take place in between training sessions. The amount of weight that you should use for hypertrophy does vary a little bit, but somewhere between 60 to 80% of your 1 repetition max on each lift is an ideal amount of load to be able to produce enough stimulus for your muscles to grow. In terms of the amount of volume, so how many times you should be lifting those weights, classic advice is somewhere between 8 and 12 repetitions and 3 to 5 working sets. Rest periods in between those sets varies a little bit, but between 1 minute and 2 minutes tends to be about ideal. There are a couple of extra things that you really want to pay attention to. So the first is the eccentric part of the lift. So this is when you're either lowering the weight or the muscle group that you're targeting is lengthening. Having control through that phase of the lift and not just dropping the weight is going to have a massive impact on the amount of muscle that you build. So it's not just about lifting the weight, but also about lowering it with control. And the other thing is being able to train close to failure. So not every single set needs to be a maximum set, but you need to feel that the muscle is fatiguing and starting to fail towards the end of each set. That's how you know you've got the right amount of intensity. That's going to provide enough of a stimulus to your body to actually expend calories and energy on building more muscle tissue. And it really is that simple. That is the entire theory behind muscle building. There are some fringe elements that you hear about, and these tend to be more to do with training methods rather than the theory. The theory is fairly well acknowledged, but the methodologies are open to interpretation, open to tradition and individual preference. So that's where you hear the most variation. Oh, you should be doing drop sets to build muscle. You actually need to lift heavier to build muscle. All of these things tend to start with a grain of truth. But in reality, if you're following those principles I've outlined, you will build muscle. And once you have built muscle, if you're looking to further optimize your training, there might be small changes that you can make to your periodization or your programming of your training over time that will make small changes. But realistically, for most people, you stick to those rules and you will be able to build muscle. If you've got any questions about muscle building, please do put them in the comments below or send us a message. We'd love to hear your questions and get back to you. Right, let's get stuck into the next question. Okay, how can I improve my cardiovascular fitness? Interesting question. Obviously one that also applies to lots and lots of people as well. So looking at this from a performance point of view, you're going to separate cardio into 2 different segments because there are 2 distinct categories of cardiovascular exercise which require different training methodologies. The first is aerobic. So aerobic is your low intensity and tends to be longer duration bouts of cardiovascular exercise. So you're not out of breath. It's not as intense, not as demanding, but you tend to then focus more on endurance. So doing that for a long period of time. And then your other type of cardio exercise is your anaerobic. So higher intensities, classic examples of this are your kind of interval training, high intensity interval training, where your heart rate is much higher, the intensity is much higher, but the duration is not quite as long. And so as a result of that, people tend to split that up into smaller segments with rest periods in between. In terms of developing your aerobic capacity or your aerobic fitness, you're looking at training 2 to 4 times a week, potentially 5, but often in terms of leaving time to recover in between, 2 to 4 is ideal. Now we want to separate that training into different heart rate zones. So for aerobic fitness, you're looking at zones 2 and 3 predominantly. And you'll be able to find out, adjusted for age and gender, what your heart rate zones would be. And I'll put a link in the description below so that you can check out what your heart rate zones would be. So you want to focus with aerobic exercise on the lower intensity and longer duration cardio. So these tend to be called steady state, and it's what we call building your aerobic base. So this is a baseline of fitness that allows you to move on to handle higher training intensities and recover more quickly from higher intensity training. A good measure of whether you're in the right heart rate zones, if you're not using wearables or a heart rate chest strap, is the talk test. So if you're exercising, whether that's on a bike, running, cycling, rowing, whatever it might be, swimming, if you feel you'd be able to maintain a conversation without having to stop every couple of sentences to take breath, then it's likely that you're in zone 2, zone 3, which is ideal for that type of training. The other type of cardio exercise is the anaerobic cardio. So for anaerobic cardio, it's higher intensity and shorter bouts. So you're looking between 3 and 5 sessions per week. A good place to start in terms of intensity versus rest is a work to rest ratio of 1 to 2. So if you work for a minute, you're going to rest for a couple of minutes, or you're going to move at a lower intensity to allow your heart rate to recover for a couple of minutes. Over time, as you get fitter, you'll be able to shrink this down to closer to a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. And for more advanced trainees, then the ratio can be even lower than this. So you could be exercising for a minute very intensely, 20 seconds rest, and then back in for another minute. Whereas with aerobic exercise, gradually you're going to increase the duration of the session. With anaerobic, the higher intensity version, you're going to be looking to shorten the rest periods and increase the intensity. So the way that you would progress both of these types of cardiovascular fitness is slightly different, hence why we separate them out. Aerobic fitness, increase duration and endurance. Anaerobic, you increase the intensity and you reduce your rest periods in between. Again, I hope that's helped. For anyone looking to build their cardio fitness, this is a great place to start. Those rules will work for somebody who's never exercised before, all the way up to elite level athletes. But if you do have any questions around cardio training, of course, pop them in the comments and we'll get back to you. Just pause to say we love hearing from you, and I would love to answer your questions around your fitness and your well-being. It can be, again, on any topic. So we span across psychology and mindset, nutrition and diet, and of course exercise and training as well. So anything within that remit. If you feel you would like to know more, please do drop us questions in the comments and we'll get back to you. Also, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and share the channel and share this video with anyone that you think might find it useful. And for any more tips or articles and videos on all fitness topics, head over to the AMP app. The link is in the description of the video. It's completely free, and there are lots more contents, including our podcast episodes, on there for you to browse. All right, let's get into the final question. This one is a really good question around avoiding workout plateaus. There's a couple of different ways to talk about this. I think workout plateaus can be frustrating, and that's why we tend to want to avoid them. But actually, plateaus are a sign that you have adapted your training. So not necessarily such a bad thing. If you have made some progress and you feel fitter, stronger, more flexible, whatever you've been working on, if you reach a plateau and you're doing the same sort of training that you were doing, but you're not getting any more of a response, it's possible that your body has made those adaptations and you are now at that new level of fitness. So it's a good indication that you can give yourself a pat on the back. You've made some progress. But in terms of how do you continue to move forward from that point, the first port of call is always to come back to first principles. So come back to those guiding principles of how to, the ones we've already talked about today, build muscle, build cardiovascular fitness. Check that the intensity of the training is sufficient. Is the frequency of the training sufficient? Are you doing the right type of exercises? Are you controlling the weight properly in the eccentric portion? For instance, with muscle building, are you training in the right heart rate zone if it's cardiovascular fitness? You need to check those things first before trying anything else, because those are the basic principles that get your body to react to the training that you're doing. There are obviously other factors that will affect how responsive our bodies are to training. Nutrition is a huge aspect to consider when it comes to this. So sometimes training plateaus may be that as a result of not that the training is not sufficient, but that your body is not being appropriately fed and rested to react properly to the training. People do occasionally talk about things like genetic ceilings. It's true, we do have genetic limitations, but it's more likely that limitations imposed on progress will be as a result of lifestyle, recovery, and fueling preparation for sessions, and then the training itself, as opposed to having reached genetic potential. So that's kind of maybe why plateaus occur, and whether we should be worried about them or not, probably not. In terms of how you actually break through plateaus, it is simply by being able to increase the amount of training you're doing, whether that's the intensity of the training, whether that's the duration of the training, and that might require a step up in recovery strategy in between training. So let's say you're going from 4 sessions a week to 5 sessions a week. That's definitely going to increase duration and intensity, and will lead to greater improvements. However, it's also going to require more recovery as well. And this is often when people get into this kind of training plateau space, where bringing on board a coach is a really useful thing to do. And one thing to consider if you're taking on plateaus on your own, particularly if you're training for health and well-being as opposed to a performance goal, is changing the type of training that you're doing. So if you have made some progress with strength, let's say, and you're not actually training for anything that requires strength specifically, it's okay to plateau and be static with your progress on your strength for a while. Just do enough to stay where you are, and then focus on another type of training, because not only does it keep you motivated and stimulated with your training and enjoying it, but also there are transferable effects from different types of fitness across. So your flexibility may end up actually helping your strength training because you're moving better. Therefore, you're able to engage muscles differently. And when you go back to make more strength progress, you're finding some of those exercises easier. There are so many examples of when that happens. You spend some time on your aerobic fitness and you find that it improves your ability to recover, and therefore you can train more frequently, and therefore it's easier for you to build muscle because you don't get as fatigued. There are so many examples of stuff like that. So if you do find that you have got stuck with your training and you would like some advice, we offer taster sessions and one-off sessions where we can sit down and talk with you about your program and check if what you're doing is correct, give you some reassurance, and also give you some guidance as well. And if you would like that, just send us a message. All right, guys, this has been another good one. Thanks very much for listening as always. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.